Okay. Lee, do you want to pick up where we left off last time?
I would, just a bit regarding program VPs. Now, some years ago, the COTS curriculum deleted that track, being stubborn and oriented toward the way we've always done things. In Rocky Mountain District, we chose to continue to recommend program VPs. Some chapters do and some don't. Some roll that role into the music VP, but either way, something that we found successful in Salt Lake City was that the program VP would phone the director every night before the rehearsal, every blessed week. Never took it for granted. Okay, director, tomorrow here is what we need. We're having election of officers. It's going to take this chunk of time. What do you need? You're working on this block of stuff. Will you need section rehearsals? Do we have to have the custodian open the rooms for those? What are your requirements to be a happy director? Every director who's worth his salt is an egotistical, stubborn person. That's the raw material we're working with. That's the desirable trait, but you need to harness that. Director doesn't really want to worry about the risers. Director doesn't really want to worry about the bake sale. He's there to do his thing. He's the unchallenged captain of his piece of the rehearsal night, chapter night. Beyond the director's slice of it, he steps to the side, and the program VP and his resources becomes the unchallenged leader of the meeting. Hands it back to the director. Do it every week, so it's never forgotten, never taken for granted. We found that to be useful.
Thank you. I think too, speaking of the director, there's the law of diminishing returns. Everybody has a time where they can concentrate and a time where they need a break, except the music directors who could do this 24 hours in their sleep. Like I can do this 24 hours in my sleep. So we need to be conscious of everybody in the room and the fact that it has to be varied, because I can't work on a song for 40 minutes and get any better after the first 20. And, we just need to appeal to every member to make sure that somehow we're bringing out the best in every member there. And that's besides all the negotiating of skill levels and testing voices and handing in recordings to see if you approve. All that is what your chapter decides, but all that is, they do have tunnel vision, and they're the paid person. And a lot of them say, well, you're paying me for 2 hours, so I've got to work for 2 hours. And the answer is no, it's more than that. So keep that in mind. Any more comments on that part about successful chapters? And and then when you bring somebody in, I guess to wrap that up, when it's not just about the chapter meeting, it's about your attitude and how you approach people, where you find them, where anybody else finds them. When you bring them in, your elevator speech, what they can expect, the fact that one night is not a chapter. And there's contest rehearsals and show rehearsals and arguments about what's going to be on the show and how much time everybody has to sing, because the chorus wants to do their entire 72 song repertoire. And I don't want to sit and watch somebody stand on the risers and sing 20 songs in a row. That is not what I, as an audience member, want. So, all those negotiations and that don't happen all in one night. So anybody coming in the door, as you go out and approach people, make sure they understand that one night is not your course makes.
Yep, the chat box is clear, Beverly. I think we're ready to move on.
Okay, so the third piece is moments of truth. And this is part of part of the leadership training program. And since I can never help but add my own comments in it, you will see that there will be some additional comments. What he wrote about this is each chapter interaction is a moment of truth, the point where individual chooses to engage or disengage from what's offered. It applies to singers, potential members, guests, audience members, etc. The purpose of this thing is to identify situations, figure out how we're going to do it better. Excuse me. I'm so sorry. The learning objectives of this moments of truth is to define what they are, explore your own moments of truth and their impact, steps to understanding what you create, ensuring positive responses, and that's a huge responsibility in itself. Exploring moments of truth, we're going to use a chapter show as an example, and examine your event and its moment of truth, what can ensure positive responses. So a moment of truth is the interactions that people have. Each interaction is a moment of truth, the point where an individual chooses to engage or disengage from what is offered. So every time you have a new person walk in, every time during their orientation year, they decide maybe this isn't for them. Every time they have a choice to make a yay or nay decision, those are moments of truth. Okay, and it includes when you go out to ask people for money, when you ask people to buy a raffle ticket at a meeting night. Every single thing you do is a reflection of your chapter, your course, who you are as a person, what you're representing in the world. So with that, I'm going to open up the chat for this. I'm not sure everybody has to reply by chat. I want you to think about how many moments of truth have you experienced so far today? And maybe we should do it on chat. Send a couple things and Bruce can interrupt and tell me what people are commenting on. You know, have you had a lot of moments of truth? It might be, you know, an irrelevant topic or something that you want to explore more, or gosh, that was a little too long or too short. So
I can share, you know, a moment of truth as it relates to youth outreach in high school guys. And I can tell you that the first time that a high school kid sings a tag where it's just the 4 high school kids and he's carrying his own part and it rings, you can see his eyes light up. And I think, you know, in a lot of cases, that's a moment of truth for a young man who is exploring what his voice can do. And to be able to sing a cappella and ring that tag, you know, that can happen for a guest at your chapter meeting as well. Let's see what's popping in here. Nothing yet. So let's see, get your ideas in there, right? Is it an audience member when, you know, you bring a quartet on your show, like, you know, Masterpiece or Newfangled 4, right? We had some great quartets out in the Far Western District that we featured on our chapter shows. And sometimes, boy, those quartets, they just kill it on stage and the audiences can't wait to get out of their seats. So that's another example, you know, where an audience member has, boy, this is a chapter show. I'm going to make sure I come next year and let's see who they put on stage, right? We've got, you know, Stormfront, other quartets out here in Rocky Mountain that, you know, certainly can just nail those chords and really get the audience engaged. How about you? So in your chapter, in your barbershop experience, what was your moment of truth? Another one that I recall was Freddie King talking about the first time he went to a show, a barbershop show as a young man, and experienced on stage what the you know, experience was hearing a chapter quartet on stage, and then going up to having, you know, the international champions take the stage and what that was like for him. Another one is Mike Rowe, if you've ever heard him tell his story. I still don't know if it's Jaron or Jerome. You'll have to tell me at some point. He has a moment of truth to share. So yeah, so go ahead. And you can tell us how to pronounce your name. You can go ahead and unmute. Let's see if he's out there.
I can see him.
Yeah.
Nope.
He's having audio issues.
There it is. Let me unmute him. I can't. Scott, I need to be a co-host
Hey,
again.
is that better?
Oh, there you go, Jaron. And is it Jaron or
Perfect.
Jerome?
Sorry, I was connected to a speaker and it wasn't working. All right, so the name is Jaron. You got it correct the first time. Like Aaron with a J. And I am, as of about a year and a half, new director of Northfront Sound, and new to the barbershop world as of then. I used to be a high school choir director. And anyway, mine was a moment of truth as a director. I came in and I was loving the music. I was loving the guys, but I received an email one night from a guy that I didn't know very well in the chorus, and said, "Hey, Jaron, when we sang this song the other night, and then you shared some of your personal thoughts afterwards, and then fill in the blank, he shared what it meant to him about some personal struggles that was going through in his life, and how singing that song together and then discussing it afterwards made a big impact in his life. Fast forwards 6 months, at our last rehearsal, he stood up and shared, "Hey, I just wanted to share this as a group." And then he shared that experience with everybody. And over that 6-month process, I just started to recognize that what we do makes a big difference, more than just having fun singing. It can impact people's personal lives. And I realized that I just need to remember that. I need to remember that it's not all about singing. It's about people's hearts, and how we can bless them and help them to be stronger and be happier.
That's a beautiful point. Thank you.
Yeah.
It is. It's our
That's
time
excellent.
too. We're giving up hours of our time, board members even more than that, but to be at a rehearsal, you want it to be important. I have a moment of truth someone shared with me just last weekend. They were in a quartet. They actually were living in New York City at the time. They would go out on Saturdays and sing in the park. And sometimes they went with a female quartet so they could sing to each other if there wasn't an audience. And he said they'd spend the whole day on Sundays out singing in the park. He said, and people would gather around until we hit a lot of wrong notes, and then they'd all leave. He said, so it became, even though they were doing it just for the fun of it, it became more of a coaching session for them to have the audience members just casually give them approval or disapproval to either the song they were singing or the way they were singing it. It's just, you can find moments of truth in anything you do.
That's wonderful. We've had a couple more comments. John sent me something. Someone at exercise grabbed me. I guess John does some swimming stuff down at the Y or something. Grabbed me to tell me how much they loved our Christmas show. So that's awesome. And then singing Valentine's, right? If you've ever seen Moment of Truth, right? We can all spend hours right now telling stories of different singing Valentine's experiences, whether they were wedding proposals, right? And the quartet on Valentine's Day was just part of that experience. I've done the one at 7 a.m. where you go into the house, the guy's standing there in a tuxedo with champagne and strawberries and roses, and the wife comes out from the bedroom in her bathrobe, not knowing what in the heck was going on, right? And just, those kinds of experiences we can all share. Wanted to remind, we have had a couple folks join later this morning. Please open up the participants panel and make sure your name is listed there along with your chapter name. So if not, just hover your mouse over your name. There will be a rename button you can click on to put in and list it as your name and chapter name, as you see all the other folks have done on the call. Neil received a thank you card from a patron last month. We've never gotten one before, for inviting them to attend our Christmas show. It's impacting lives, and that was their goal for the show. You never know how one song in one performance is going to affect someone out there in the audience, right? It might be the song that their grandma or grandpa always sang to them as a young child. History, you never know, right? It was our wedding song that we danced to, and so you just never know. But music has the power of doing that more than any other art form, I think. Beverly?
Did anybody have a comment about like the classes we've been in today as far as a moment of truth? Besides the fact that we'd really love to do this in person, but we're doing it on Zoom. Anybody? Nobody's typing? Okay, so
I've got something.
go ahead.
There are several members from my chapter here, which makes me very proud. But I've been involved in some text conversations in the background. There are lots of ideas flying around, which is very cool. I love seeing this kind of energy.
We might have time at the end for you to share some of those if they can be shared. That's great. You know, as far as today, you know, when you look back on anything, you look for a moment of truth. What was positive and why? What was negative and why? I don't like to lecture, but it's really hard to have conversations on Zoom. It's much easier to do in a room when you're there. And maybe next year.
I'd like to, if I could, have a moment.
Absolutely.
Your statement that every member has more value to the chorus than just their voice struck me. And following up on finding out what they're good at, what they like doing. And that, I think that's going to be a wonderful tool. I thank you for that.
Thank you. All right.
It also mentioned the core value of the chorus kind of comes from everybody, and turning that core value into an elevator speech that everyone embraces. Simple but powerful.
There's, it's also dangerous, I will say. You will find some dissatisfaction in members, but those are just jumping off points for more discussion. Hopefully you can keep them if you want to keep them. It's all a challenge. Every individual experiences a moment of truth when they encounter us, whether or not they like us or not, whether or not they like our message or not. Are we making sure that we delight and astound them? And this is even when you go into solicit for your fundraising, it's that core simple, you know, the fact that barbershoppers are normally polite and kind and great people. We all have bad moments and we all have bad days, and we need to put that persona that belongs to barbershop when we're doing barbershop work of any kind, because it's important that we know that we are projecting what we want if we're going after money or members or a community attachment or something. We want to do it honestly, but we also want to do it, if we're speaking of the organization, we want to do it representing the organization. So, you know, don't badmouth barbershop. I'm so glad that they took the HFI BHS conversation offline, because that was getting to be what people talked about, and that's not what this is about. That's not what barbershop is. So, oops, I didn't mean to go there. Organizations must give serious thought to how they will establish, communicate, and manage the importance of these moments of truth. Left unattended, moments are just likely to be uneven, confusing, discouraging as pleasant. So an individual can choose to engage or disengage at any moment in time. And if everybody is aware of that, we all want to relax and be ourselves. When you're in a rehearsal meeting or at a show, when you're a part of the chorus, please remember that you are representing the chorus. And if you're a visitor, you come in, if you have visitors in your meetings, you know, we always want to be ourselves, but we want to be the best of ourselves for barbershop. Because they can always choose to not be there. Okay. Identify potential moments of truth where the organization interacts with others. Discuss why it's important. Collect data. Identify problem areas and determine a better response next time. Implement the changes. Train others on the new responses. It might mean updating manuals. It might mean just talking briefly about something that happened that you want it not to happen again. Analyze outcomes to measure changes. So that said, you always want to do it with the deal makers in mind. People are appreciated and sought for their talents. People get a high return on their investment. People experience fun and humor. So if we look at a performance, we talked about we were going to look at a deal maker or at a moment of truth for a performance. So how well does your performance meet these characteristics? How well was the advertising? You know, and with the moment of truth, go back to the slide before, which is Are you appreciating the people? Are they getting a high return on their investment of time, energy, and resources? And is it something that is going to be positive when they get done with it? So when you look at advertising, do all those things apply? When you look at the ticket price or the availability of tickets to your community, is it broad enough that you can accommodate the people you need to accommodate? Oops, sorry, my finger slipped. When you look at the venue, when you're looking at a moment of truth, was the parking difficult? Was handicap parking invisible? Were there elevators? Was the right door to walk in good? You can't do much about the weather. Was the ticket purchases, was it easier? Was it hard when you walked in the lobby? Could you tell where you went to buy a ticket if you didn't have one ahead of time? Did you have the printout? Did somebody there have the names of everybody that bought online tickets in case the person forgot to bring their printouts of their online because they don't have a printer of their ticket? When you look at the program and content and you look at a moment of truth, really take time to look at beforehand. Does this meet all the criteria of what you want in a program? You know, does it continue to move forward? Do you have dead space? Things like that. How are you filling the dead space? When you're introducing a song, are you introducing just, hey, we're not going to sing Love by, you know, Joe Blow, or are you going to say, you know, let me take you back to a time in the 50s when poodle skirts were popular. Just settle in. You're preparing your audience. You're preparing your singers to get in the mood, to sing the right song. You know, that's part of your program. That's part of your content. How well did you do that in retrospect, or how well are you planning to do that so that everybody has a positive experience? You know, what's your sound quality going to be like? Is it enough? Do you need more mics? Visual performances, professional presentation. How many of these, for a moment of truth, look at it ahead of time. We got the show, we got the schedule, and we have somebody who's the chairman of our show. He's our show chair. There's 1,000 pieces that go into having a show. And every one of these has to be looked at, all the way down to who's going to be standing in the parking lot telling you which door to go in, and who's going to make sure they have a flashlight in their car just in case one of the parking lot lights went out in the school parking lot. All those things, your teams, whatever it is, and this is for performance, but whatever team you're building on, again, it's not a one question. It's a, let's look at everything that can go right. Now let's look at everything that might go wrong. How are we going to take care of it if it happens? Just be prepared so everything is smooth. Everything happens as it's supposed to happen. So when we go look at, you know, that's a show look. So now let's look at your community interactions for moments of truth. So if somebody had a chance to engage or disengage with you when you're soliciting advertising, when you're training your members up to solicit advertising, make sure they're aware of, number one, not talking too long. Number two, making sure they talk about the benefits and not just say, hey, we're this 501c3 and we're singers and we'd like you to give us money. Especially after COVID, it's a very difficult conversation to have with advertisers. You need to have a value-added speech. You need to practice. You need to be good at what you do, unless it's your best friend and they're going to give you money anyway. Other than that, the same thing for advertising. I did these backwards. When you're looking at advertising and you're asking for donations, maybe of advertising, maybe a free billboard because there's been no message on it. You're a 501c3, they can write it off. People might not know the rules. See if you can find somebody to give you the rules of how they can use it for a write-off if they need a tax write-off, how important it is, that one billboard. Participation in community outreach. And here's an item up for discussion. Someone said, well, we should go to an opening of a Habitat house and sing. And on the surface, because this is the first approach, it sounds like a great idea. But my first question is, were you helping building the house so they know who you are? Or are you going to sing to entertain? Are you going to sing for members? That's a personal bias of mine, to not just show up somewhere and sing a bunch of songs. If they don't know who you are and whether or not you've been involved, I'd love other people's opinion on this. Tony, you want to kick in and say something about that?
Tony, me or Tony?
No,
Sure.
Tony. Tony Sparks, you.
Any Tony. Tony
Pick a Tony.
Sparks.
No, I actually completely agree. I think big picture thinking leads to better outcomes. And so understanding the value you bring based on the circumstances you're presenting with. Always be aware of and thinking of the bigger picture, where you fit into it. And then you can insert yourself in a community or a group or an effort by understanding what the priorities and values of those you're trying to engage embrace.
Does anybody else have a comment about that? And that is it is a community outreach, and it is putting yourselves out there for people to see, but you can't do that indiscriminately.
Yeah, and what if you helped build the house and didn't sing?
Great point, because of who we are and what you do, right? What we do.
Right. And do the chorus members know you do that? And maybe there's a chorus member who wants to get involved in that. And if they don't know that's what you're doing, then they don't have an in to get there. And they'd be more comfortable if they knew somebody. Our personalities, we are so close when we're in those meetings, and yet you can be so distant if you choose to be. And that's why I'm saying it's not just about your voice on the risers. This is a community of people who care, because if we didn't, we wouldn't do this. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of heart. Someone said, what can be, how can you not love a group at the time, because this was years ago, of men who sing around, who stand around and sing about their mother in love. How can you go wrong with that group? So, carry it forward to now there's women in the organization, and times have changed in COVID and all that, but who we are is definitely a representation of a certain bunch of people that want to share their talents with others. So go ahead.
Go ahead, Neil.
Thank you. Regarding arts organizations, we had a group in our town that was a bunch of different types of singing organizations. It was called Choral-Laborative, and COVID basically killed that. And it's only now where we're trying to build this back up. I don't think we were the instigators of it, but we participated in it. So it's taking a while. So it's one of these times in our lives, in our local area, where we have to basically start from maybe not from scratch, but we have about 80% still of work to still get to get back to where we were before COVID.
And with that said, the makeup of our courses is different than it was before COVID. We've lost members. We would have lost some members anyway, because it's 3 years later. So in any 3-year period, we've lost members, but we've also lost some of that. Well, we used to do it this way because we don't have as many members that remember that. And that's a good and a bad thing. It just means don't take anything for granted. In our district, we are combining with the Dixie district to do a Lakeside Harmony in the summer, which is going to be a learning session for kids and adults. And someone said to me, well, we just want to do it like we did before. And it's like, well, first off, I'm female and I wasn't invited before. Second off, that was 10 years ago. And half the people in the courses don't even know what that means. So don't refer to it like we used to do it before, because it's going to change. It should change. You shouldn't be doing anything. Go ahead, Bruce.
Nope, that's fine. We did have, in regards to the slide that's on the screen, Beverly, and I'll let you decide if we want to go into detail. We did have some questions from Keith surrounding not just selling tickets to shows, but other sources of income for community solicitations and things like that. I don't know if that's detail that you want to go into. I'm also not sure what's available on the YouTubes that we have, if it's covered in there as far as soliciting funds or raising money for the chapter outside of chapter shows.
I will say two things. One is, again, find out who is really good at this and help them train your members at a meeting to say, and pretend I'm the customer, and approach me for money. And I learn, and then it's my turn to approach you, kind of the Paul Ellinger, where do you do your singing? He goes through this whole script you have to practice. The same thing with fundraising. You need to know what's a good approach and how he can be so successful as opposed to other people who are not. That said, everybody should look at grant writing, not getting the expertise in your chapter, because that's something is a very specific, broad thing, but you can probably hire a local talent who does work for small organizations to do grant writing, and whatever they charge you is going to be less than you're going to get from the grant. So it's pretty much a win-win situation if you can find that person. And it might be, if you have large grant writers in your community, they may on the side do grant writing for smaller companies. The other thing is we are a 501c3. It is tax deductible. You may get lucky and find somebody who'll do it for free. Do not, when you're looking for funds, ignore the fact that grants are out there. Now in North Carolina, banks have to donate money to community organizations, 501c3s. It's part of the charter of being a bank in North Carolina that they have to have money, whether or not your course will get it or not. And look at other organizations you know that manage to raise money and have them come in and do a session for anybody that's interested.
And I think something that's helped there is everyone in Harmony has provided a number of resources for us now, because a lot of times whenever we're doing youth workshops, grants could be declined when it was just for the boys. And so we had to do boy-girl youth workshops, and now we have a ton of resources with music and 8-part stuff. It's just fantastic. So it's really opened some doors there for grants. Lee, if you want to unmute, go ahead and chime in here. He said he has a comment.
I'm sorry, I have a comment that has long since passed its time, but I will throw it out anyway. And this comes back to chapter culture. At my first COTS, Lloyd Steinkamp told me, we don't lose members, we drive them away. So as you think about your chapter culture, please think about how you would feel if this was your first night and you just walked in the door. Is this offensive behavior? Or is this welcoming behavior? I cede.
Okay, Beverly. Nothing else in the chat box there. If you want to keep rolling.
Okay, I'm gonna stay on fundraising for a minute. I think you all are aware of the fact that Harmony Foundation has funds available. The Spartanburg, South Carolina show just brought in Signature, and we're at it now. They do have a reputation of involving their local high schools in Greenville and Spartanburg into our contests and onto the shows, but they managed to bring in Signature for 2 days in the high schools. Plus they threw a show. It was right before Christmas, so a lot of people couldn't come because they had their own Christmas shows to do. But I'll tell you what, just imagine that those guys walking in, even though they'd seen them on the screen before in preparation. But imagine those guys walking in your high school and giving you, and then they also had a chorus because they were all on stage. They had chorus rehearsal that morning with Signature. So, you know, Harmony Foundation is another means. They have strict rules and guidelines as any organization does for giving money, but they do have money available. So. Yep,
and another thing, in California, at least, we had some restrictions regarding fundraising activities because we were, you know, nonprofit organization in California, a singing organization. If we just put on a car wash, right, to raise money, that was frowned upon because it wasn't related to the core purpose of our organization. So our events for fundraising had to tie into singing somehow or music somehow. So, you know, if you were to, you know, sell flowers along with your singing vallegrams, or, you know, provide that as an option, you know, that's one thing, but just to like go sell candy bars door to door or something as a fundraiser was an issue, at least in California. So whether those, you know, different kinds of fundraising activities are under your consideration, just be aware that may be a factor in your jurisdiction.
Okay, so we all need more money. You know, and HFI gives money back to the districts. Talk to your district too. You know, your district either has money or doesn't. but they also may be a source of fascinating funding. We did in our district $1,000 grant to any of the chapters who filled out the paperwork, but for marketing purposes. And it was a very finite definition because we had a little bit of money to spend. Interestingly enough, I think only 6 or 8 courses took the money out of 20 some, but you know, your district may also be able to get involved in, and it may be something the district wants to do, to look at some fundraising that they can then pass out to the chapters if they meet the qualifications. So back to the deal makers, back to the moments of truth. When you have casual sing outs or singing in public, think about your engagement with people. There is an unwritten rule that says if you're singing in a restaurant, you sing one song and you stop. People will be nice for one. For two, they want to go back to their conversations. I think that goes true in a lot of places. If you're singing in public on purpose, if you're doing a Friday night stroll and sing, just keep moving, you know, sing one song, keep moving on. If you're taking over a park downtown and you're doing it for free anyway, you can pretty much call your own shots, but make sure you engage the audience. You know, again, it's all about, it's not just about, people are not there to watch a movie when they come see you. They want to be engaged. Tony's laughing. They want to be engaged. They want to feel like they're part of it. You know, I'm not a big, you know, the performance used to have a script that said you had to have an audience participation. You had to do this. You had to get them out of their seats. You had to, you know, roll. But there's a theory in movie making for attention span. And it is, think of a roller coaster. When you're making a movie, the climax is never the end of the movie. Okay. And when you do a show, chapter show, you want to bring them along and then let them off a little bit and let them catch their breath and then bring them up. So when you're putting the songs together, when you're doing any kind of presentation, even when you're out soliciting money, don't make it a hard sell every moment. Be very aware of the fact that, you know, your recipient has to have time to talk, have to have time to ask questions, have to back off a little bit. So that whole thing, that's all the moment of truth, how well you're presenting and representing what you're doing. So how well do your chapter meetings meet these characteristics? Can people engage? Do they, oh, sorry. Where am I going? Hang on a second. My finger slipped. So when you look at the deal makers, and the deal makers, we've already talked about in the last hour too, how were your chapter meetings meeting these characteristics? You might, if you have a good friend who's not interested in singing, but they might come as a visitor and be a, what they call them, a purple tie visitor or something. I think they, at one time it had that, where they're just there to see how a visitor is treated. Or if you have somebody who belongs to another chapter in town or somebody's coming to visit you, take them with you. Let them give you very honest feedback about how they were treated. Would they do it again if they had the opportunity? Was it a deal maker or a deal breaker they just experienced when they came to your chapter meeting? So a moment of truth is any interaction by email, webpage, phone, in person that forms an impression. On its own, each moment of truth is small stuff. A chapter will not sink or soar based on one tiny event, but each moment of truth is added to the scale and tips the experience. So use moment of truth to identify all the activities and event from the customer's or visitor's perspective. What can your chapter do to ensure a positive, delightful, and astounding experience at each moment of truth? When we look at our chapter meetings, that moment when they walk in the door and what happens before rehearsal starts is huge. You probably have 5 to 15 opportunities to make that a personal, a positive experience. And that doesn't mean 15 people have to go up and shake their hand and find out what they, you know, be generous, be consistent, and be very aware. And in public, when you're doing a show and the show is over and you're all meeting out in the lobby, you know, the hard sell to come to a meeting may not be appropriate in sometimes. And just as an aside, everybody have business cards. Just carry them with you. Just please carry them with you. No matter where you are, whatever you're doing, have them available. I can't tell you how many times I've gone out with the chorus and they don't have any business cards to pass out. So you might have a moment of truth, but if you have a mind like mine, I'm going on to the next thing and I'll forget who you were or how to get in touch with you. So how you review your moments of truth. First off, review your moments of truth. Whenever you have an interaction, take the time. If a visitor has come, then maybe the board or the membership team or somebody should reflect on how well that person was treated, what they saw as far as that person's interaction. Somebody should be assigned to watch the guest, maybe not interact with them. Of course, you're going to give them a riser buddy if they want to be on the risers, or if you let a visitor come in and stand on the risers, perhaps they just stand there for warm-ups and then you ask them to sit down during a song. However it is your chapter manages visitors is fine. That's how your chapter manages visitors. You can shake it up once in a while. You can talk, please talk about it, whether it's appropriate. And if two people walk in and one's an old barbershopper and one's never sung, do you treat them the same or differently? Or do you just be very open about why you're treating them differently? So every time you have a visitor, every time you've been out in public, take the time to reflect and think about how well you did, how you could have done better, and did you represent your course or your chapter well in what you did? If you have to plan your responses next time for doing it better, do that. It's your course, your chapter, your culture. Make sure your chapter members understand the culture that they're in. Make sure they understand what's important to you as a chapter member and what's important to you, what your chapter has decided is important to them, so that we go back to your elevator speech, we go back to how you handle strangers, how you react in public, how you represent yourself as a member of your chapter. It's your culture. And if you blow it off during, and I don't mean to be rude, but if you blow it off during your rehearsal time, people are going to know that, and they're going to take that approach that it's not important to you. So you have to make sure that it's important to you all the time. So your next event might be a show, a public performance. It might be member recruitment. Maybe you're doing a guest night, and you better be prepared. You better be prepared for 30 people or one. Talk about what you're going to do depending on those numbers. Music educator outreach, plan it. Don't let somebody just say, hey, I know somebody at the high school. Make sure you understand what's going on and how they're going to represent. Coaching sessions. Your coach should know a little bit about what you expect and what you're going for. Don't just hire a coach and have him come in and do what he does best without any knowledge of who you are, because that also is a moment of truth for your chapter. The guy doesn't have a clue who we are or why he's asking us to do these things, and we're not up to that. So be careful in every outreach and every communication you have with people. So identify situations and delight and astound with what you create. It's all about, again, it's all about your culture, who you want to be, who you want people to see you are, and getting through to how you're going to outreach. I need a drink of water. I'm going to let somebody else talk for a minute.
Okay, this has all been excellent stuff, Beverly. We really appreciate all the work that went in behind the scenes. I know some of it was years ago, but a lot of it is very current and very relevant to where we're at with our chapters today. Checking out the chat, and we did have some comments about community interactions. Tony mentioned that could include collaborating with other groups, barbershop or otherwise, in performances and activities. And one of the things that we talked about in other sessions that I've done with leadership academies is, if your course has a website, for example, the primary role of the website, it's pretty much three things, right? It's join us, or come see us perform, or maybe in the third category, buy our merchandise or buy a singing Valentine. But really, the focus of everything that we do from the public facing side is pretty much like, hey, we're something you could be a part of, right? And even more so now with everyone in harmony. But the key element there is that, you know, there is a moment of truth in what we do. There's a moment of truth in what we provide, whether that's a show or a chapter meeting or, you know, an interaction in an elevator, right? What are the different ways that we could get people to either want to come see us perform or want to come on a Tuesday night and join in on a rehearsal and see what it's all about. We don't have anything else in the chat box at the moment.
Okay, I'm going to make these slides PDF available so you can ship them out. I'll do that. I think I have to redo them because I did them earlier, made some changes. I'll get those out to you. I am open for any conversations via phone or email if anybody'd like to contact me and explore a smaller piece or a larger piece of the conversations today or something that didn't even come up today.
And just for everybody's perspective, we are wrapping up this session, but we're going to go ahead and give you a 10-minute break now as we head up to the top of the hour. We're going to flip presenters, but for Beverly's portion this morning, we want to thank you for being part of our day. It's certainly been a wonderful session. Those of you who want to put a quick comment in the chat for Beverly, or we can all just do applause, as I recall. So yeah, Zoom applause. Yeah, so don't go anywhere. The next hour is chock full of activities. Scott, do you want to give us a quick preview of what the next hour is, what the agenda is there?
Yeah, in our general session to wrap up our Leadership Academy, we're going to hear from our new district president. We're also going to hear from a couple people about some things that are happening in some of our chapters that are going well, some innovations. And we're going to talk about ways that the district can help your chapter. So come back for that in 10 minutes. Grab some lunch and eat it while we have our lunchtime meeting.
And Scott, in your host role, I think you might have this ability for intermeeting information. If you could capture the participants list for Tony, that would be good. I think that's available to you there. So go ahead and pause the recording and we'll be back at top of the hour, everybody.
Thank you
Thanks.
all. Really appreciate it. Good luck.
Thank you, Beverly.
Thank you, Beverly.